Hi, Bob Jennings back with you on the second in our series about our new or relatively new last unrestored Hemi Daytona. No one really knows, but we believe so. You know, Chrysler took the Dodge Charger RT in 1969. They contracted with a company called Creative Industries to quickly turn out 500 of these. They made 503 to be exact, to turn out 500 Dodge Charger Daytonas in 1969 to make them legal to race on NASCAR. Out of those 503, it's estimated that there are somewhere around 15 to 20 Hemi Daytonas with automatic transmissions, probably 15, but no one knows exactly sure. This is one of those very, very rare Hemi Daytonas. We think possibly the last unrestored one on the planet. We have an opportunity here, and I thought I'd spend just a minute before we go into the engine bay. If you remember in the first segment of this series, we told you that Christine, when she moved from Ohio down to Texas back in the mid-1970s, she took the nose off of the car, saved it, put it aside, because the car wouldn't fit in her garage with the nose on it. Now, I still have the nose. It is undamaged, unwrecked, undented on anything. It's sitting very carefully in storage in another part of our garage, and we will put it back on. And yes, there is a replica of a Daytona nose behind me in green. Now, they never made the Daytona in that color. We actually painted that to match our limelight green Superbird that we'll show you in another series of our Jennings Wing Car channel. But back to the Creative Industries nose. With the nose off, we have an opportunity to see how these cars were put together. And bluntly, they were slapped together by Creative Industries quickly as they could. Let me point out a few things that we don't often have the opportunity to see. With the nose off, there is nothing wrong with this nose. This car has never been wrecked. It's never had a body panel replaced, removed, other than the nose, of course. It's never been damaged. We just have the nose off in order, that's how they did it for storage. You will note, being an automatic, it has a transmission cooler here on the front, and of course the radiator. Now, both of these we boiled out. We've made sure they're clean. These are the original parts. We just don't want to take any chances with it. I want to show you a couple of things here before we go completely into the engine bay to illustrate some things that maybe you don't know about Daytonas or Chargers, and maybe you do. And I'm sure if I mess something up that somebody will be more than happy to point it out, because here in America, we're all victims, of course. So let me point a couple of, that was my editorial comment that my son, our camera guy, and my friend Matt are giving me the look on, but you know, sometimes you get tired of that victim crap. Okay, so here we go. Point out a couple of things. This is an indicator of how crappy the work was, Creative Industries. This is the line going to the bottom of the radiator to the transmission cooler. You'll note it was really just kind of bent and wrapped around the top of the radiator core support, held in place by this cheap, flimsy plastic tag that actually has a little bit of orange overspray. This is an orange overspray. This is an orange V2 Daytona. You see a little bit of overspray here on the radiator cooling tag. Over here, you see one of the hidden serial numbers that Chrysler stamps on the radiator core support. This is one of the things you always check when you're buying a car. Make sure that the radiator core support matches the VIN on the dash. There is another hidden serial number in the trunk and the weather stripping, and then of course you can check on the engine and transmission. The last thing I do before we move to the interior of the engine compartment, over here on the passenger side, when we got the car, many of the electronics weren't working, which is usually just a feature of 50 years of age. So we took the horn relay off, cleaned the contacts, and resoldered the connections, and now the horn works fine. On the back of the horn relay, there is a little orange paint where some overspray went in there. On the horn itself, if you look real closely, I believe our camera will show you, there is a little bit of orange overspray on the horn itself. And then the original windshield wiper coolant bottle right here behind it. Now let me point something else. Yes, there is a slide hole there. That's, you know, it's 50 years old. What I want to point out is the remanufactured ones have this lid wrong. The remanufactured ones have the lid opening from the back. The originals, they open from the front. They have some cockamamie ball story about why, but that's not important. So let's move to the engine here. Glen Ray Radiators is who did our radiator for us, and I talked to Bob up there at Glen Ray, and I said, Bob, I don't want to do anything. I don't want it painted. I don't want it sanded. I want my original radiator back. I just want to make sure everything's done. And what a great guy. No, he didn't pay me or give me a discount, but I like to mention stuff like that. This is the original fan shroud. It is the original fan, and you can see it's one of those, maybe you can't see it, but it's a thermostatic fan. It is the original Hemi Daytona fan pulley. And these are a little bit hard to find. I've got the alternator off. I'll talk about that in a minute. Now behind the fan, you can see the water pump. It's a funny little story about the water pump. Water pump apparently went out in around 1971, 72, 73, somewhere in there. Christine pulled it, put an aftermarket one on, but kept the original. And when I bought the car, she sent me the original water pump. That is what's on here. We rebuilt it and put it back on. I mean, I think it's pretty cool. You got a 50-year-old car with the original, pretty much everything. I'll point out the things that I have had to replace, but they're pretty much just rubber pieces. All right, so it is the original water pump that has been rebuilt. Of course, we blew the block out about a week ago. A lot of sludge in the bottom of the block, water sludge, not oil sludge. And at that time, I put in a new thermostat. I did, as I mentioned in the first segment, we did have to replace the heater hoses and radiator hoses. I do have the originals. They're in a box right behind me on the floor, but I wasn't comfortable. The heater hoses were so brittle, you look at them cross-eyed, they were going to break. The bottom radiator hose was cracked. The upper radiator hose was questionable, and I thought, I got the originals. We'll leave it at that. I'd rather be safe on this one. And let's move over here to the master cylinder and power booster. In the first segment, I told you we were rebuilding the wheel cylinders. We did all the wheel cylinders in place. We decided at that time, because we had some other issues with the brakes, I found that the 3 rubber brake hoses, there's 2 on the front, 1 on the back, had in 50 years swollen to the point they were totally clogged up. So we went ahead and replaced the rubber brake hoses. I did keep the originals. No, I don't know why. And at that time, I thought, we've done brake shoes, we've done brake hoses, we have rebuilt the wheel cylinders. So we went ahead and pulled the master cylinder. That is the original. We rebuilt it ourselves right here in the shop because we wanted to make sure everything was fine. The last thing I want to show you here in the brake segment is just some of the creative industries little touches. You'll see these are the hoses for the headlights. You see a little bit of orange overspray on the hoses along through here. You see a little bit of orange overspray on the master cylinder, the brake booster. This has power drum brakes, very rare option, and there is even a little bit of orange overspray back there as we finish up our brakes before I move over to the other part of the engine.
Now, I keep hearing you say that you kept all these parts. Are we going to show people your parts room with all your spare parts on a future video?
One of the things that Ryan and Matt, my son Ryan and Matt, my longtime friend and fellow car junkie, we have decided we're going to show each and every one of these cars. They all have their own unique story. We're going to have future videos of each car. Ryan, if you want to pan around here, we have our purple car hauler to match our purple NHRA Summer Nationals champion Superbird, Hemi Superbird. The Alaska Superbird over there, the yellow Daytona, that's what I call the surfboard Daytona. I have a green 4-speed, I'm the second owner Superbird that we'll talk about the story on that. There's a yellow 6-pack, and we got a parts room that's got way too many parts in it. And because it's my son that asked that question, I know why, because they always are joking, the parts room's worth more than the cars. I don't know about that, but now, let's get to the engine for a minute. In the engine bay, let me point a few things out here for you. The engine is all original. There's never, head has never been taken off. The oil pan's not off. Intake manifolds never come off. The original plug wires are long gone. It had aftermarket plug wires. I have put repop, they call them remanufactured original plug wires on it that look correct, but they're not the original plug wires. I don't want to mislead anybody. Original coil. Christine found the original distributor for this car, not the one out of her Hemi Roadrunner. This is the original distributor from this car, which we have rebuilt this one as well. The carburetors, these are original Hemi Daytona carburetors. These are not the ones from this car, but I was lucky enough, I had a set, we rebuilt them. These are true, correct Hemi Daytona carbs, and yeah, I know how rare that is. Let me point out a few other things before we leave this. Because this is an automatic, all of the linkages are really unusual. You want to make sure that the springs are in the right place. You have a green spring on the front to hold. This is the linkage to pick up the second carburetor. So the back carburetor is your main carb. And if you look, that's a little hard to push. If you look, Ryan, am I hiding it there? There is a solid bar here, and if you stomp down on the main carb, the bar pulls the second carburetor back, combined with vacuum to open up that second carburetor. So there's 3 springs here, one on the second carburetor, one on, this is the linkage when you stomp down to step down linkage on the transmission, and then the normal red spring. This spring is green, that spring is black. The bottom one is a red spring for the Hemi Daytona accelerator pedal. Anything else here on this side? All we've really done is, I didn't even want to spray the engine off. We've actually used those things you can buy at the car parts store called, what are they called over there, Matt? Tub of towels. Those are those towels that you buy to clean the grease off your hands. I went through about 10 of those tubs, wiping the engine down, getting the old grime off, because I wanted to leave the markings and the overspray. And if you remember my original goal in the first of this series, I said, we don't want to restore this. We want this to be a repository of history, so we're just cleaning stuff off. In a minute here, we'll move to the other side of the engine. I'll talk about that. Okay, so back to the engine bay. Let's point out a few things. This is actually the original oil filler cap. Again, Christine kept it. I've cleaned it up just to make sure that it's of good use. Then we move over here. You'll notice I've got the power steering pump and the alternator off. First, because that's how I'm going to get to the exhaust manifolds. They're very difficult. And second, because both of them have parts that the power steering pump, of course, has rubber seals. We rebuilt that. The alternator with its various electrical connections, we rebuilt them. They're both original to the car. We're just rebuilding them internally because we don't want to replace. Down here, down in the bottom, Matt, you may need to bring that light over here a little better. You'll see the original fuel pump, very, very rare fuel pumps on Hemis. This is the one that came with the car, which we have rebuilt. This is the vapor separator. And they're supposed to be black. This one over time has lost some of that, but cleaned all that and replaced the rubber fuel hoses, as you can see there, for these. And let's see, the alternator mount, that's the original. We did have to do a little welding to get it back. We do all this stuff ourselves here in the shop, pretty much. I did send the radiator out and the distributor out because I can't do those, but most of the rest of the stuff we do ourselves here in the shop. When you get over here, a few unusual things. So I've told you the hoses are repops, the spark plug wires. Back in the back, this is one of the weirdest parts of all. There's a little green vacuum separator. That's actually an EPA control. They're very hard to find, yet Christine found it for me. You'll notice a little bit of orange overspray on it. This is when you decelerate in a Hemi, they wanted to remove the vacuum advance. So what it would do is, it would take the vacuum advance that had accelerated the timing while you were accelerating and backs it right off to reduce emissions. And that's what the green vacuum, whatever they call it, vacuum separator is what I call it. She found that. I cleaned it up, put it back on yesterday. In the very back, behind the back carb, there's a little tree type device, kind of looks like a cactus. And someone had soldered the one of the 3 points off. I had to drill that out and put the hoses. And then finally, The PCV valve over here on the passenger side valve cover, that is not the original, but I do have the original coming. Christine has it. She'll drop it in the mail to me. Now, up here on the firewall, the voltage regulator, the numbers on there are 338 up here in the upper side. It is mounted, the lettering is upside down. The part number is 2098300. It looks like it might be 6300. This is the original voltage regulator, ballast resistor, original wiper motor. If you look real closely, there's overspray on the wiper motor studs. And the original wiring harness bulkhead connector over there on the right-hand side, to my knowledge, never been off. And from looking at it, having worked on these cars most of my life, I'm pretty sure that the bulkhead electrical connector has never been removed. Underneath that is the starter relay, and I haven't really looked at it, but it has never been removed either. That's pretty evident to me. This car did not have a tack, so if you're really sharp-eyed, you'll see that the tack wire is not hooked up. This one had a clock, but not a tack. So under the engine, I'm trying to think of anything else. Guys, is there anything that you can think of that I ought to mention? Okay, well, until next time. Oh, I did want to mention, in our first segment, we thought we would get this running at the end of January. Sadly, that's not going to happen. The transmission has been delayed, so it looks like it'll be another month or so before we get it. We've got to get the transmission in, mount the exhaust manifolds, which is very difficult, and then we'll be about ready to fire it back up. So let's say a month from now. In the meantime, we may do several other videos. Each car here has a story. As I've said all along, all of these cars have a story, and I think it's worth hearing them. I told you the story on this orange Hemi Daytona at the beginning, and we'll do some stories on some of the other cars later on. Till then, Bob Jennings, Ryan Jennings, Matt Johnson, all of us, we'll see you again next time here at Jennings Wing Cars, the YouTube channel. Thanks.